Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the best place for the best takes. I'm your host, Benjamin Cure. This is the Benjamin Cure Show. What a weekend of football. I know I say that every weekend, but this one was different because no matter what type of fan you were, you got to see what you wanted. If you were an old school fan who wanted to witness, tough defensive lines making battles at the line of scrimmage, imposing their will on an offensive lineman, you saw that. If you wanted to see top-tier play from your secondary, you saw that. If you wanted to see elite pass rushers do their thing, you saw that. So you got that old-school defense wins championships kind of toughness. But if you were a younger fan, maybe a more new fan, a fan who looks more forward to the exciting offensive play, the flashiness and the finesse of offenses in 2022, you saw that as well. You saw spectacular run games, some incredible play calls. You saw elite quarterback play from arguably the best in the league. And I think I can make the argument this morning that every single one of the better quarterbacks won their matchup. So I'm going to get to all of that later. I'm also going to touch upon later something that really bothers me. I am really upset about my Giants versus Eagles prediction. And the reason I'm upset about it is not because I was wrong. I've been wrong before. But it's because on my way to making that prediction, I broke so many of my own rules. So I'll address that later. But we're going to start with the primetime matchup from last night. The Cowboys versus the 49ers. Now, I'm going to cut right to it. If you saw that Jerry Jones interview after the game, it is incredibly telling. He was the angriest I've ever seen him. He said he was sickened, that he called the loss sickening. He looked so frustrated. If he had lasers for eyes, he was looking a hole through someone. He was so angry in that moment. And I found his soundbite very telling. Look at who he gave props to. He said he forgave Brett Maher, that he redeemed himself, so there's no bad blood there. He made his kicks. He said he was fine with Mike McCarthy, that he was okay with him, that this does not change the status of his employment or him potentially being fired. He cut out that conversation right away. And while I don't think, Jerry Jones has said some things in the past that he'll go back on, but for the most part, as of recently, he's a man of his word. He is going to stick to what he says. If he tells the media after a game when he could be his angriest that he's sticking with McCarthy, that means he's sticking with him. He's not moving off them. Who did he not mention in that little rant and that angry moment of that interview? He didn't mention Dak Prescott. And I've said it all year long. This is one of the great things about having a show like this. We've been doing it for just, close to a year now, certainly the entire football season. I talked about Dak Prescott and his decision-making before the season. I've said it during, and I said it after. This is all-encompassing right here. I told you, Dak needs everything to be going perfect. He can't be worried about Brett Maher missing an extra point or not being able to make the field goal when they need him to. He doesn't need to be worried about Tony Pollard being injured. He can't worry about his offensive line not working. He can't worry about Ezekiel Elliott not finding the holes. He very much so is a quarterback that was drafted late. He's not a first rounder. He was never the best guy in high school, wasn't the best guy in college, is not the best guy in the NFL. He has limitations, almost self-imposed sometimes. He needs things to be going smoothly. He is not a Trevor Lawrence. He's not a Patrick Mahomes. He's not a Joe Burrow. He's not someone who can rise above their circumstances and elevate everyone else. Dak Prescott right now, in terms of what he needs, is very similar to a Tom Brady, is not able to elevate his teammates. And that's tough when you're talking about not a 40-something-year-old quarterback, but a young one that you're paying an average of $40 million a year to and a $160 million contract, and you expect him to be the guy, the leader for the biggest football brand, really the biggest sporting brand in the world. So Dak Prescott is on the hot seat. And I don't know if the Dallas Cowboys plan on drafting a quarterback with their later round picks. They've got a lot of third round picks, a lot of fourth round picks. That could be something we see for the next coming years, because the frustration that Jerry Jones showed as the owner, as the face of the franchise, which is rare. Usually the face of a franchise is the quarterback. And people can make the argument all they want that Dak is the face. No, he's not. Because who did Sunday Night Football interview? Sure, they interviewed Dak. Of course, Aaron Andrews sat down with him. They interviewed Jerry Jones. They asked him his opinion on what's going on. I did not see any other owner throughout the weekend or throughout this season be interviewed prior to a game. That star means just as much to Jerry as Jerry means to the star. And to pretty much exonerate everyone who you could have possibly blamed in that moment, in Mike McCarthy, in Maher. But then, silence is very eerie here. You don't defend Dak Prescott. Sometimes silence is the loudest noise in the room, and it was last night. So some things that I noticed, that felt the start of that game like an 80s football game. Now, of course, I wasn't around back then, but I've seen enough clips and highlights and recaps of games to know that toughness that was present, that was some old school toughness. That was the fundamentals of football kind of toughness. Win at the line of scrimmage. Win with your toughness. Impose your will on the guys on the other side of the field. That's what that was. I also saw for the 49ers, I saw a really alert secondary from the moment they stepped onto the field. You saw Fred Warner with the pick. That was sure to be coming with Dak Prescott playing as badly as he has this year and really his entire career, but having it disguised by the great play of other people. It was ever so present yesterday, and that secondary was ready. They were sharks, and it was feeding time. I also saw Purdy come out, and this is so funny to me. Everyone talked about all week how defensive coordinator Dan Quinn was going to be all over Brock Purdy and how he was going to impose their will and they were going to bring pressure that Brock Purdy had never seen before in his NFL career. And I didn't understand, I made the wrong pick with the Giants pick, but I, for the life of me, had no idea why other people, so many of the people who had been against the Cowboys all year, were picking them to beat the 49ers. The 49ers are a well-oiled machine. No matter who they have played in the past couple weeks, you can say it was an easy schedule. They're undefeated right now. They're on a hot streak. And momentum, it's not everything, as you saw in that Giants game. It's a bigger factor in college football, not so much in the NFL. But it does mean something when you're rolling like that, when you have confidence like that. And Brock Purdy all week was pretty much told, and I'm sure he heard, that Dallas was going to bring the house against him. And to be honest, he did look a little shaky to start that game. He was playing what I call 50-50 quarterback play. Essentially, one play he looked really focused and with it. The next play he looked a little shaky, was nervous making his reads, tried to escape the pocket. There was nothing there. But by the end of the first quarter, he had found his rhythm. And that's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles' problem next week is if you don't get to Brock Purdy, if you don't make him nervous like everyone claims he's going to be, if you can't impose your will on him within the first 15 minutes of the game, you're not going to be able to. Because Brock Purdy, in true veteran fashion, started to become really calm as the game went on. Even as close as it was. People also said this week that Brock Purdy would be nervous if the game was close. To be honest, he looked better. He looked more comfortable in that situation than he did early in the game. He's a young player, so once he finds his footing, it's expected that he is going to be more comfortable. But not that comfortable. I mean, there is an eerie amount of confidence for someone who is drafted in the 6th round. You expect confidence out of your Andrew Lucks, your Peyton Mannings, your Eli Mannings, who were told their entire lives, hey, you're the best guy in the building. You don't expect that from the 6th round pick who's been coined Mr. Irrelevant for the last 9 months. You just don't see that. You don't expect that. So what you're seeing here is truly unprecedented from Brock Purdy. But once he found his rhythm, he was on. And I think this was the most telling sequence of events last night. On 3rd down, when his team needed him the most, when they needed to put points on the board, when they needed to convert, on a short yardage 3rd down situation too, Dak Prescott threw an interception. You know what Brock Purdy did when his teammates needed him the most? On a 3rd and 15 after a penalty, he threw the ball to Brandon Ayuk on a cutback route, and it was a 1st down. Interception, completion. Moving the chains, stopping the drive. There's a difference here, and people will talk about Dak Prescott and his athleticism all they want and how he deserved that big contract. But the writing's been on the wall for a long time. No offensive line, no run game, no big-time major weapons. Dak Prescott can't come through. Everything needs to be perfect for him, and in the postseason in the NFL, I've said this, you're not going to play perfect football. He's not going to get that. And last thing here before I move off this Cowboys game. What did I tell you weeks ago was my main worry about the Cowboys? Funny, a lot of angry people in the TikTok comment section and on Twitter. I said the Cowboys only had 2 playmakers, that they were very thin. They had CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard. Those were their guys. Those were the go-to offensive playmakers. But I also remarked that they'd been dinged up over the course of the season. and that their body types, they're fast guys, they're agile, they're a little thin, they're a little bit smaller than you'd want someone to be who's getting hit as much as they are. What happened? Tony Pollard went out of that game yesterday, and it was a totally different offense. They could not move the ball, especially not in the running game. They couldn't move the chains. They didn't have a consistent run game because Ezekiel Elliott is washed, despite what you may hear. He is not a running back one, and he is certainly not worth the contract that you're paying him right now. They're going to have to move off him in the coming year or so. So, this just goes to prove everything that I said for the last 9 months. Real full circle moment here. I told you that Dak Prescott could not rise above his circumstances. He didn't. I told you, despite what everyone tells you about him, his decision-making is the worst and the worst moment and the least opportune moment. That's exactly what it was. I told you that the Cowboys were very thin when it came to playmakers and that they couldn't afford to lose one of those guys to injury or to a penalty or something like that. What happened? They lost one of those two key guys to injury, and the offense never looked the same. So the Cowboys have a lot of inner thinking to do. Jerry Jones is going to be very upset for a long time, and I'm very interested to see what decisions he makes because he looks like a man on a mission right now. And to be perfectly honest, I looked at the comment section under his interview, and there were some people joking, but it's true. Jerry Jones is an older man. He feels like he's running out of time. And God bless him for his competitive spirit. As at his age, a lot of billionaires in his position would not be worried about a football game, but he is. And that's a testament to what he's been for the NFL for so many years. A competitor, someone who wants to win. But he's going to get desperate here. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some massive changes coming in the next 6 months before next season starts. So it's still early in this week, and there's plenty of time for fans to speak out and be angry. But this morning, I feel like the Cowboys fans are even more upset than Bills fans, and that should not be the case. I think Bills fans should be very upset, and they have every right to be, because that was probably the most embarrassing performance by the Bills all year long. They were sloppy, they were unprepared, they looked unready for the moment, they were disoriented, and by the end of the Bengals' third offensive drive, they were defeated. Sean McDermott, there's something to be said here about the way the league is moving and where it's headed. Offensive-minded head coaches, guys who were previously offensive coordinators or offensive assistants, Brian Daboll had a lot more to do with Josh Allen's success and his mentoring than Sean McDermott did. I think that's very evident. And you see Brian Daboll become coach of the year, going to the Giants, mentoring yet another quarterback, honing his skills, making him look like a Josh Allen replica, maybe a little bit, a Walmart version of Josh Allen in the sense that Daniel Jones is not nearly as capable. He's a little more limited. But you see now that Brian Daboll was such a big part of their success. And to be honest, this morning, I could make the argument that the Bills are worse off today than they were 2-3 years ago. Because now they're coming up on another year of not having won anything. They didn't go to the AFC Championship. In previous years, they've made it to the AFC Championship. So they haven't quite won it, but they've advanced an extra round. Now they're going to have some big questions, a lot of free agents on defense. You're not going to be able to bring everybody back because you paid Von Miller $120 million last offseason. Your cap constraints start to feel that right now. Your quarterback contract is starting to kick in. There are so many elements that will result in the Bills probably losing a lot more than they bargained for this offseason. But there's a conversation to be had here about Sean McDermott, a defensive-minded guy, doesn't quite understand the nuances and the importance and the details of offensive football. He's not the offensive coordinator. Ken Dorsey is. He's not the play caller on offense, I don't believe. I believe Ken Dorsey is. But you see, they'll have moments where they call a run, and it's not because there's any sequence to it. It's because they're like, we haven't called a run in a while. Let's run one of these run plays. Let's hand it off to Devin Singletary. They, in 4 years, have not been able to develop an offensive line or a run game, and that's a problem. You have known this. This is the bane of your existence. This is what goes wrong every single time. You have no offensive line. You rely on the spectacular Josh Allen, and you have no run game to support him. Look, run games aren't everything. You can win a Super Bowl without them, but at least have a formidable one. They don't have anything. Josh Allen I've said this all year long. The reason that he has also grown unfocused besides Brian Daboll not being there is because he feels he has an internal pressure that he needs to be the guy to make the plays because he doesn't trust anyone else. He doesn't think anyone else on that team is capable of making the play. And good for him. It's a good thing to feel like that responsibility is on you as a quarterback. But what was the best thing about Peyton Manning and Tom Brady over the years is that they could delegate. They could take a step back when it was necessary. When the defensive line was starting to cram up for a blitz, he knew when to hand it off. Those guys knew, hey, let me distribute here. Let me get the ball out of my hands. Let me get this game out of my hands, even if it's just for a moment. That's what a run game is. It's moving off of the high-pressured, throwing on every single down that football has become. And for Josh Allen to not have anyone else to fall back on, that indicates that the Bills aren't doing their job. They're not drafting and developing. They're not really paying attention to what's going on in free agency. They're not getting him the help he needs. And it's frustrating, but it also, through these kinds of situations, you have clarity. You learn, hey, this guy is this guy is not. He can make the plays for us, this guy can't. He can call plays, this guy can't. Josh Allen, for so long, has been told, I feel like for the last 18 to 24 months, has been told he's in the same class as Patrick Mahomes. No, he's not. Because Patrick Mahomes gives you the spectacular without all those mistakes. So many touchdowns, so many big plays, barely interceptions. He'll have periods where he goes off the rails mechanically and things start to go wrong. But for the most part, all of the success, all of the great stuff, and none of the mistakes. That's rare in football. We saw it with Aaron Rodgers during his MVP seasons, and now we're seeing it with Mahomes way more consistently at a younger age, which is why it's so shocking. But Josh Allen is not the 1A, 1B to Patrick Mahomes. That's not the conversation today. It is Joe Burrow being the second guy, and possibly after next weekend, the best guy. Now, the big question going into next weekend's game, Bengals-Chiefs, is Patrick Mahomes better on one leg than Joe Burrow is on two? That's the real question here. Because if Patrick Mahomes can go out there and still play just as effectively or, up to par with what they need, they'll be just fine. I mean, Chad Henne kind of showed you, hey, for one drive, 98 yards downfield, I can get it done. And I'm sure Mahomes would have been able to as well. So, I'm done trashing the Bills for now. Let me get into the Bengals. So the Bengals, I thought, really rose above their circumstances. And that was really, really fun and exciting to watch because it shows you what good coaching looks like, what good personnel looks like, what great players look like. And this credit goes to coaching all the way. Zach Taylor, who for a long time under Andy Dalton, towards the end of that reign, was told he was not the guy, that they should have fired him, they should have gotten rid of him. Now, it's funny what coaches look like and how you see them blossom when they get the right quarterback. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow. You see them really flourish, and their creativity through play calling and the schemes that they're trying to implement, it works because they've got the right guy at the helm, a capable person. So Joe Burrow was as perfect as he could have possibly been. He was very accurate, very situationally aware, was never nervous, was never thrown off. To be honest, I just in my last segment, I've said this for a long time, you're not going to play perfect football in the postseason. That might have been the closest to perfect I've ever seen someone play in the postseason. That Joe Burrow versus the Bills sequence, that whole game, Joe Burrow never forced it downfield, always took the underneath stuff when he needed to, never looked disheveled, never looked like he was being, like the Bills were imposing their will on him. He was very, very impressive during that game. And I think the credit also goes to Brian Callahan, the offensive coordinator, for game planning for what must have been probably the toughest situation this weekend. Missing 3 offensive linemen. I mean, everybody was selling their Bengals stock. No one thought that they could win the game missing 3 of their starting offensive linemen. You're playing backups. In the NFL, you do not want to play backup offensive linemen, as we saw this year with the Rams, with the Bucks. You do not want to be in that situation. But the Bengals, credit to Brian Callahan, totally changed their game plan. They wanted quick routes, short routes. They wanted Joe Burrow to take the underneath stuff when necessary. They didn't throw downfield a ton, which was Also smart because, the elements and what was going on there, they were practically playing in a blizzard. It wasn't the time for spectacular, which is also the reason why Josh Allen couldn't get it done. That team is so reliant on the spectacular from Josh Allen. When you're in the middle of a blizzard like that, you can't. It's not nearly the same probability when you go to throw the ball downfield and when you're trying to make that big play. It's not going to happen. Not in those circumstances. So the Bengals game planned for that, and it was very effective. Also, credit to Frank Pollock, the offensive line coach for the Bengals. Coaching up those backups, it did not look like a backup unit. They imposed their will on Buffalo. Buffalo looked defeated. They looked tired. They looked unprepared. They looked disheveled, almost a little bit scared. Quite frankly, they weren't ready for the moment. And that was shocking to see for a team who, had been the Super Bowl favorite going into this year for the AFC. I had them in my Ben's best list as 1 or 2. And once again, they come up short. There's going to be some questions surrounding Buffalo this offseason because to settle for mediocrity, that's essentially what they're doing by staying with Sean McDermott. You are settling for less. You're saying, I have one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL right now for the next 5 to 10 years at least, and I'm okay with an AFC Championship loss, a second-round loss, going home before the big game. The fact is, the Bills, after years of being almost like the Cowboys and not having enough guys, not having enough talent, not having the right coaching, they finally have the right guys in certain spots. Von Miller as your closer, as a pass rusher. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and they still can't get it done. I understand. I'm the first one who would tell you, you don't try to get happier than happy. The Bills need to shoot for getting happier than happy. They need to go out there and get an offensive-minded head coach. Sean McDermott is an excellent defensive mind, but defensive minds in today's day and age, for the most part, should be defensive coordinators. That's as far as it goes. We are in a league where quarterbacks get paid $500 million over the lifetime of a contract. They get paid $40 to $50 million a year. That's only going to go up this season with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert's contracts. You cannot afford to put all of your eggs into the defensive basket when everyone in the audience, in the stands, at home is screaming, it's offense, it's quarterbacks. That's what matters right now. They need to get Sean McDermott out of the building. You make him a defensive coordinator. You pay out his contract. You find a young offensive mind or even a veteran offensive mind, but you can't afford to stick with what's not working. And for the past 4 years, under Sean McDermott, with all the talent in the world, with all the expectations and hope in the world from fans and analysts, come up short once again. So this is that time for me where I have to address the pick that I got wrong. Now, I did go 3-1 over the weekend with these divisional round picks, but this one hurts just because, like I said at the beginning of the show, I swayed from my normal rubric of decision making here. I went against my own rules in place that I have for making picks on games with the Giants versus Eagles. Now, in terms of actual game flow, I'll get to that in a bit, but what exactly are my rules? Well, number one, I always pick, especially in the playoffs, the superstar quarterback. I pick the better quarterback. And for me to pick the guy who wasn't the superstar over the superstar, that was just idiotic. Number two, I think I got a little bit too involved in the story of it all on the momentum, which, like I said, is a big part of the NFL, can be really impactful to talented teams like last year's Bengals, like this year's Jaguars, but it's not going to take you super far if you're a less than capable team, a limited team, which is what the Giants were. So, Giants are back. They have a bright future under Brian Daboll, but this is where those questions come into place. It's the reason I don't like guys like Tua or Dak Prescott. And I was a little bit hypocritical. It's the reason that I do not embrace Daniel Jones all the way. Now, I did say last weekend he was probably the best third down quarterback I'd ever seen. And that's true. I mean, his ability to make plays on third down throughout the season has been remarkable. And he did it a couple times during that Eagles game. But it wasn't enough. And you see that. There's a reason you don't just get quarterbacks from thin air in the NFL. Or that you don't draft them in the 6th or 5th round and they work out. This is a position that needs to be talented, that needs to show you in college and in high school that they're the guy. There are certain intangibles that they have to have, certain requirements that need to be met, that guys like Daniel Jones just don't. And in the NFL where talent matters, especially towards the end of a season, when it comes down to quarterback play, as you saw over the weekend in every single one of the games, Daniel Jones was not going to outplay Jalen Hurts in a playoff game. That was ridiculous for me to think. I also think that the offensive line was a little bit shaky for the Giants. They couldn't, on top of the fact that the Eagles' defensive front is masterful and elite and is as great as they are, you could tell that the Giants were a little bit in their own head during that game. Saquon Barkley was the only guy who had a big play. He did well, but it's not enough. It's not enough with a single player on a run game and a capable third down quarterback to make it to a Super Bowl or to make it to an NFC Championship game. So the right team won that game. Now, what did I see that is going to be telling going into next week? Well, for Jalen Hurts, there was a lot of conversation surrounding him throughout the week. Was he healthy yet? How is he looking? If he's not 100%, was he 80, 90? Was he lower than that? Was he 60 or 50? What was going on with him? So I watched that game, and I can tell you, he wasn't playing scared, but he was playing smart. He was very self-aware. He was evading pressure. He made it a point to not get hit. Even when he rolled out and his classic quarterback scrambles, he was not willing to get hit. Always slid, was always down before the guy was even within a couple yards of him. He did not want to be touched. So on top of that, with the sickness, he played relatively well, but it is something to look out for. He'll be a little bit healthier by this time next week. I'm sure of it. But he clearly is, he's self-aware that he is not 100% himself right now, and he's not willing to hurt himself before the big game. So that's something to look out for against the 49ers, who are going to bring all the pressure in the world with Nick Bosa. And so, like I said, read too much into the game, a little bit upset with myself. The Giants are in a tough spot now because now you have to please the fan base who did like Daniel Jones for a while, but you're sticking with mediocrity. You're sticking with a middle-of-the-pack guy, and for a lot of teams, that's good enough. Because let's be honest here. Hey, despite what everybody thinks and how we make it out to be on camera, not every team can compete for a Super Bowl. But, giving Daniel Jones a long-term franchise quarterback contract, I don't love that. I think those are the ones that come back to bite you, and to commit your money in that way to a guy who is less than capable, who's not a top 10 quarterback in the league on everybody's best day, or on his best day, I don't love that. I hope the Giants in a big market don't settle for mediocrity, but if they do, they're telling you, hey, we don't want to be awful. They don't want to be a bottom-of-the-barrel team, and they're okay with, under Brian Dable, maybe having a few outlier seasons where they make it pretty far. Let's see what they do in the draft. Let's see who they re-sign. There's still plenty of potential for them. But as long as you have Daniel Jones at the quarterback, you are limited as a team. You're not going to have the explosive plays of a Patrick Mahomes, of a Joe Burrow, of a Josh Allen, and you're not going to have the elite decision-making of a Joe Burrow or of a Justin Herbert. You're just not going to have those intangibles or that decision-making process. So we're sticking with football here, but this story doesn't have to do with a game. It's actually one of the first stories of the year of NFL free agency, and this one has some big implications, so let's get to it. Over the weekend, the Lamar Jackson contract situation was brought back to the forefront because to start the week, last week, let's give some context here, the Ravens had a press conference with Harbaugh and the Ravens GM saying they were pretty committed to bringing Lamar back, and they seemed all in. And a lot of people were sold on that. I was not. I found it a little bit questionable that, first of all, Lamar Jackson's not there. So if this is going to be a done deal and you guys are all in, why is he not present? That press conference was to clear the air temporarily because no one long-term was going to believe that. And I think based on what you're seeing now, Lamar Jackson doesn't want that to be the narrative. He doesn't want people to think, oh yeah, it's a done deal, I'm going back to the Ravens. Because over the weekend, like I tell you, these leaks don't come from nowhere. It was leaked that Lamar Jackson was offered a $133 million guaranteed by the Ravens, which was up from their initial offer of $113 million. Now, you have to ask yourself, who's leaking that? And in order to answer that question, you have to think, who does this information benefit the most? This information benefits Lamar Jackson. Someone in his camp, I know he doesn't have an agent, it's his mom, Someone leak that number out there because it makes the Ravens look bad. And before you say, whoa, Ben, $133 million guaranteed. Yes, I would be the first one that would take that kind of money. But we are not Lamar Jackson. Let's be honest here. Look at the standard of the league. Kyler Murray, $189.5 million guaranteed. Russell Wilson, $161 million guaranteed. Aaron Rodgers, who might retire, who might walk out on his team, they gave him $150.8 million guaranteed. Josh Allen, $150 on the dot. Mahomes, $141.1. Now, you can argue that those certain guys there, like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, are better than him, so they deserve more. But let's be honest here. In any negotiating table, the key number is the highest one. Kyler Murray, $189 million. Kyler Murray, who has looked awful in playoff situations, who is not nearly as accomplished in terms of plaques or awards or iron and real hardware as Lamar Jackson is. Lamar Jackson's an MVP. He's been in playoff situations. He showed you what he is capable of. And sure, he's a running quarterback, and the injuries do scare you, but the fact of the matter is there another Lamar Jackson out on the market? If they dare to franchise tag him with a non-exclusive tag, meaning they intended on trading him, I guarantee you Lamar Jackson is not going to be a Raven because there are going to be multiple teams who are willing to offer at least 2 first-round picks for him. If Deshaun Watson got 3 first-round picks, I can't imagine what Lamar would get. Lamar would have to be at least 3 and a second, or even 4 first-round picks, and then throw in a third. There would be a lot of people moving after Lamar Jackson. And if you don't believe me, take a look at these names. I put together a list of 12 teams who are willing to get a quarterback right now and will stop at nothing to get one. Stick with me here because these are pretty obvious. The Falcons, yeah, they'll move off Desmond Ridder in a heartbeat. The Panthers, Sam Darnold, yeah, that's nothing to write home about. The Bears, I think they'd be willing to go after Lamar Jackson. They have Justin Fields, who they hope will one day be as good as Lamar Jackson. Why not get the real thing and put an end to the misery? The Bucs, quarterback uncertainty. Tom Brady's not going back there. I'm calling it right now. The Saints are a historically good organization. They want to get out of this rut, and they know that if they got Lamar Jackson, they might be able to sneak Sean Payton and tell him, hey, Sean, forget these other teams. Come back to us. We won't give up a first-round pick for you or anything like that. You're under contract with us already. Let's go win some games with Lamar Jackson. The Commanders would call. The Texans would call. The Raiders would call. The Patriots would probably call. Robert Kraft would, he'd extend over Bill Belichick and say, yeah, we're making that call. The Jets would, of course, make that call. It would make the most sense if we're being honest. And the Titans with Mike Vrabel, who have not had a superstar quarterback the entire time he's been there, yeah, he'd definitely make the call. So 12 teams. I didn't even include some of the other iffy teams. Essentially, half the league would be willing to call for Lamar Jackson to get him on their team. And the fact that the Ravens aren't willing to pay Lamar Jackson more than $133 million guaranteed when they know what the magic number is, they know he wants it fully guaranteed, or at least we've heard $220 million guaranteed, which is way off. I mean, let's be honest, we're talking $100 million difference in the guaranteed money. They can't sit on a stage in a press conference and tell you they want Lamar Jackson. If anything, the Ravens want out of Lamar Jackson. They want him gone from the building. They do not want to deal with him anymore. They think, which they have every right to think, they think that because they are a historically good organization with a good defense, that they can figure this thing out. The league has changed. This is not a defense wins championship league anymore. Despite what people may tell you, the writing's on the wall here. Quarterbacks matter. And Lamar Jackson's injuries, if anything, strengthen his case for making more money. Because the Ravens, when Lamar Jackson is not out on the field, have been unwatchable. They don't put points on the board. They can't win games. They don't sell nearly as many tickets. They don't sell nearly as many jerseys. And their ratings have experienced a massive drop-off, I'd assume. I mean, we've seen other teams lose their quarterback, and their ratings are in the dirt. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens are experiencing just that. So if you're okay with going through a total rebuild, of trying to find another diamond or gem in the rough here, best of luck. You're not going to. Lamar Jackson is a generational talent. He's one of one. He is the top tier of dual threat quarterbacks, and you're not going to get him for $133 million guaranteed. let's be honest here. They're not going to get him for 140, not for 150, not for 160. He won't agree until that number is at least 210, because another team will give him that. And that's all the bargaining chips that Lamar Jackson needs. Because even if the Ravens tell him, look, that's unrealistic with your injury history, he can say, all right, franchise tag me. Let's see who thinks I'm worth it. And there will be at least half of the teams in the league calling to get Lamar Jackson on their squad. I rest my case. This is not a debate of whether or not Lamar Jackson should or shouldn't be paid. The only debate here is, are other teams willing to pay it? And I say yes. So a lot of you have wanted to hear my take on the basketball stories. And I told you I'd start focusing on the NBA after Christmas break. So I've been watching a little bit more closely. I've noticed some things. I've told you about the Lakers. I have told you the writings on the wall with them, that they are not supporting LeBron James. And it is very evident. And now I want to talk about a team that is a little bit smaller market, but is more popular amongst younger audiences. And they're really bothering me right now. This is more of a, I feel this type of way story. So the Memphis Grizzlies, they have become one of the most unlikable teams in the NBA. Let me know if you disagree with me. But the way that they trash talk, the way that they go after guys, it bothers me. I'd be okay with the Warriors team acting cocky. They are one of the greatest and most dominant NBA dynasties we've ever seen. I'm okay with LeBron James going after guys, but he never does. If anything, he has the most right to go after dudes. He's the most accomplished individual player in the NBA right now, besides maybe Steph Curry. I'd give him every right in the world to go after guys, but he doesn't. But the Memphis Grizzlies, for a young team that is actually, I was going to say they're talented. They're really not. Outside of Ja Morant, not a super talented team, not super capable of winning. They have one superstar in the squad, and they have become the most unlikable team in the NBA. Why is that? They talk trash to all the wrong people. They go after LeBron James, who is arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time. They, before the season even started, were talking a lot of smack to Draymond Green, who is, say what you will about him, he has been the defensive cornerstone for the Warriors dynasty. He has been the most consistent part of their defense, and he has been very good there. He has 4 NBA championships. A lot of disrespect coming his way from the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't love that. They went after Shannon Sharp over the weekend. That was ridiculous. Dylan Brooks saying that Shannon Sharp's a pedestrian. Excuse me. Shannon Sharp is making a good living right now on TV, is one of the most successful athlete-turned personalities I've ever seen. And he's also one of the greatest tight ends of all time. He's no pedestrian. So that I didn't love either. And I didn't love that from Dylan Brooks, who is not even the second or third option on his team. I mean, Ja Morant is the Memphis Grizzlies. If they make it anywhere, it's because of him. It's not because of the role players. That's not what this is. So for those guys to be going after the OGs or really good players or rubbing people off the wrong way, I don't love it. Because essentially what they're doing is they're bragging, but they haven't accomplished anything. They're going after very accomplished individuals and teams and organizations when they themselves have yet to make it to a Western Conference Finals, have yet to make it to an NBA Finals, don't have any MVPs on their team, don't have any scoring titles, don't have any, I believe, all defensive all-pros on their team. Like, what is their ground here for going after guys? They also, one of the most likable players in the NBA, Klay Thompson, who's relatively quiet, they were chanting at him, Dynasty, Dynasty, and that was that famous get-back moment where Klay had a really good game, and I believe he had a buzzer beater during that game as well. And in the post-game press conference, he said, yeah, they were talking Dynasty, and I thought it was a little premature. Klay Thompson is a class act. That was the perfect way to put it. But I don't love what I'm seeing. I like young stars. Ja Morant is an incredible player, but the Memphis Grizzlies are rubbing everyone the wrong way right now, and I don't love that. I don't love that for a team that hasn't accomplished much. And with that, we conclude this week's episode of the Benjamin Cure Show. Gotta say, a lot of fun this weekend in football. I look forward to talking more about basketball and maybe even baseball and maybe even soccer as the season goes on. So I'm looking forward to that. I do want to make it a point to, we always say follow us on social media. Make sure you go and do that. We have a growing audience that is a lot stronger on social media probably than on YouTube. On TikTok, just hit over 1,400 followers, which was awesome. A lot of engagement there. On Twitter, we had our best week of engagement. It was a lot of fun there. Instagram was also growing big time. Make sure to follow me on all those accounts at Ben Cure Show. It's a lot of fun. I post the clips there, and you get to hear what other people think, whether good or bad, about what I have to say. But it's a lot of fun, a lot of engaging conversations, a lot of differentiating perspectives. So go ahead and check it out. Once again, I'm Benjamin Cure. This is the Benjamin Cure Show. I'll see you next week.